welcome to the Huddlecast. Today we're going to be talking about the monumental fall from grace for Mr. Sam Bankman Fried. So the U.S. government requested the Bahamian authorities to arrest Sam on December 12, 2022, based on a sealed indictment filed by the Southern District of New York. The arrest came just a month after the shocking implosion of the centralized exchange. FTX was trusted with 32 billion customer assets. The international arm allowed people to do 20x leverage. When a run on the deposits started in early November, SBF reached out to Binance for a loan, which fell through shortly after Binance got a look under the hood. The company filed Chapter 11 on November 11th, 2022, and hours later, the exchange got hacked for $663 million. Blockchain analytics firms have reported that $186 million of this went to FTX personnel, and the remaining $447 million were transferred to decentralized exchanges like Uniswap. The day before the bankruptcy, the only people who could withdraw from the exchange were Bahamas citizens, and a huge black market emerged for Bahama passports. We have record of the conversation or the emails between SBF and the Bahama authorities. He said at the close of his email, "As part of this, we have segregated funds for all Bahamas customers on FTX, and we would be more than happy to open up withdrawals for all Bahamian customers on FTX, so they can, tomorrow, fully withdraw all their assets, making them fully whole. It's your call whether you want us to do this or not, but we're more than happy to and would consider it the very least of our duty to your country, and it could open up immediately if you say you want us to. If we don't hear back from you, we're going to go ahead and do this tomorrow." So that's just like not what you do when you're going bankrupt, to like allow just a certain group to get their money off. And then he said in an interview to Tiffany Fong that he allowed that so that he wouldn't have to live somewhere where everyone hates him. And then in a Twitter Spaces, he also said that he let Japanese withdrawals go at the same time, which was really odd too, because Alameda supposedly was doing some kind of Japanese arbitrage that no one else could figure out or settle. And it's suspected that SBF must have had some kind of inside connection with the Japanese bank, and like, how else could he have got the money there to settle these arbitrage trades? Some backdoor kind of sleazy deals being done where, you know, some people are getting a preference over others. The new CEO testified. Both Sam Bankman Fried and this John Ray III were supposed to testify at the congressional hearings on Tuesday, but only John Ray III was able to attend because SBF was arrested right before he was supposed to testify. Makes you kind of wonder, you know, what was he going to say? Was there something that the authorities wanted covered up here? Why couldn't he come testify? Why did they choose that specific time to arrest him? The testimony from John Ray, who, you know, he's the CEO that came in after the whole Enron debacle. He said, "Questions have been raised as to why all the FTX group companies were included in the Chapter 11 filing, particularly FTX US. The answer is because FTX US was not operated independently of FTX.com. Chapter 11 protection was necessary to both avoid a run on the bank at FTX US and to allow our team the time to identify and protect its assets. Since the time of filing, I have become even more confident that it was the correct decision, as the books and record issues at FTX US and the many relationships between FTX US and the FTX group companies become clearer." He also noted 5 points. 1, all of US international customer assets were commingled with the Alameda trading platform. 2, Alameda engaged in risky margin trading activities and exposed customer assets to massive losses. 3, the FTX group invested over $5 billion into illiquid equity positions in a variety of overvalued and illiquid crypto startups during the height of the bull market. 4, more than $1 billion worth of customer assets were used as a loan and other payment to company insiders. $1 billion, just loan yourself. And the 5th and final point, Alameda deployed customer funds to various other unsafe crypto exchanges. So, you know, this guy, he's not playing around. He's clearly alleging fraud. And that's what SBF has, you know, subsequently been charged with. So let's talk a little bit about the press circus. Without a major exchange to run, SBF just spent the past 2 weeks or so, just all of his time, like multiple podcasts a day. He was on Twitter Spaces. He just did a round of press interviews. Some of the Twitter Spaces were kind of funny. People were, trying to act like prosecutors and, trying to get him to admit to fraud and whatnot, admit that he had the intent to harm the customers, rather than what he kept saying was that he didn't realize he was doing anything wrong. Some of the interesting quotes from the various interviews, he said, "I own close to nothing," to Andrew Sorkin of the New York Times, that he was down to his last $100,000. Well, I find it really hard to believe that he doesn't have any crypto stored away, especially since he is a resident of the Bahamas. He could have withdrawn on that final day when they let the Bahamas people withdraw. He said the vacation home was not intended to be my parents' long-term property. FTX bought $121 million worth of properties in the Bahamas, according to Reuters. And one of them was a $19 million vacation home that was actually in his parents' name. He said, "I didn't knowingly commingle funds," but then on a Twitter space, he said, "In general, the balances were generally treated as fungible with each other." And he also said it was a huge management failure and sloppy accounting, which has later come out that they were using QuickBooks for their accounting software, which, a company of that size should be using a public CPA firm. So the investigations, the Bahamas government had frozen some of FTX assets, and they're said to be investigating him in Australia and Japan. As well, we know the SEC and the U.S. Department of Justice. So I'm not sure what will happen with these open investigations in the other countries, if they'll just all fall to the wayside in favor of the U.S. investigations. But, there's money to be had when you prove fraud to your country. So there might be some more that come, and it'll be interesting to see that play out. Meanwhile, SBF has hired some extremely high-profile lawyers, Martin Flemmenbaum and Mark Cohen. These are his defense teams, and Flemmenbaum is known as the lifesaver of AIG from 2006. He negotiated AIG's settlement involving sketchy brokerage practices and accounting issues, and they were under investigation with the U.S. Department of Justice and the SEC and the New York Attorney General. And Mark Cohen, he recently represented Ghislaine Maxwell, and he prosecuted El Chapo. So he's very familiar with the Southern District of New York and very capable attorneys. So the term wire fraud, goodness, this term comes up a few times in the last couple of days with respect to SBF. So an article broke that the Inner Circle had a chat on Signal that was actually called Wire Fraud, where they talked about their alleged wire fraud. The members of the chat were Caroline Ellison, SBF, Nishad Singh, and Gary Wang. SBF, is faced with wire charges right now. And also, I saw something on Twitter that Caroline Ellison had a blog or a Tumblr page where she talked openly about wire fraud. She said in a post, how do I do my online dating profile? Do I lead with the wire fraud, or do I lead with that I like to go outside and run in the park? So just still flippant about other people's money, it seems. And then we have the clawbacks. So it will take the bankruptcy proceedings many years to untangle the mess of fraudulent transfers, but ultimately, every politician and media outlet, including the Block, who received millions of dollars in donations, they should be ready to return those funds to the bankruptcy estate. And we'll see how many do. Since the FTX fallout, we've seen BlockFi pushed into Chapter 11 in New Jersey on November 28th. Genesis Trading closed its withdrawals on November 16th. When the exchanges suggested that they should all show proof of reserves to improve the industry's, transparency and confidence, Crypto.com accidentally transferred 320,000 Ethereum to Gate.io. It's just looking like there's probably going to be some more fallout in the coming months. Hopefully not, but we'll see who makes it out alive. There was an update to the class action lawsuit. So shortly after the bankruptcy filing, a class action was filed against SBF and numerous executives and celebrity endorsers. Recently, the family attorney, Daniel S. Friedberg, was added to the defendant list. Mr. Friedberg was instrumental in the online gambling world prior to joining or shifting his practice to a crypto exchange. Poor old Larry David, he told people not to invest in FTX, but in his Super Bowl ad, he received quite a bit of compensation for doing that, and he's listed as one of the promoters. And then there's Kevin O'Leary, who charged $15 million to promote FTX. And then the charges. So the Southern District of New York, in the Southern District, he was indicted with his indictment. He was charged with conspiracy to commit wire fraud on customers, conspiracy to commit wire fraud on lenders, conspiracy to commit commodities fraud, conspiracy to commit securities fraud, conspiracy to commit money laundering, and conspiracy to defraud the U.S. and violate campaign finance laws. There's also a big forfeiture allegation stating all assets gained through any aforementioned fraud should be forfeited to the U.S. government. It'll be a bit of tug of war because I think those should actually go to the bankruptcy estate for depositors, but we'll see how that plays out. The SEC also charged him with securities fraud. Notably, the indictment and the SEC action are only against SBF, not against Caroline or any other, SBF's parents who took the, two lawyers from Stanford University and, taking these giant properties in their name. I think they could be thrown in the conspiracy side if the SEC had wanted to. And then there's also, from Caroline's perspective, she was the CEO of Alameda, which is the company that, is alleged all through the complaints as being involved using customer assets. But her father was Gary Gensler's boss for many years at MIT. They probably grew up as family friends, and, she was left off the defendant list. So the main allegation in the SEC fraud case is that he did 5 different equity fundraising rounds totaling $9.9 billion. And it was all based on promises to investors that appropriate risk management controls were in place. And clearly they weren't. They don't go into what tokens on the exchange were securities or the FTT token being a security. They just really focus on the people, the equity investors that were lied to. The charges are fraud in the offer or sale of securities, fraud in connection with the purchase or sale of securities. And the prayer for relief is that they pay disgorgement of ill-gotten gains, civil monetary penalties, that SBF be barred from ever acting as an officer or director of a public company again, and barred from ever participating in the issuance or purchase of any securities or crypto asset securities in the future. Some of the allegations in the SEC complaint are that through the summer of 2022, SBF directed hundreds of millions of more in FTX customer funds to Alameda, and then used these for additional venture investments or loans to himself and other FTX executives. They said his brazen multi-year scheme finally came to an end when FTX, Alameda, and their tangled web of affiliated entities filed for bankruptcy on November 11th. They said defendants made false and misleading statements to investors residing in this district, meaning the Southern District of New York. What's interesting is the discussion around Alameda. So they say Bankman Fried and Wang co-founded Alameda around October 2017, and prior to Alameda's bankruptcy filing, they had been the sole equity owners, with Bankman Fried owning 90% and Wang owning 10%. Bankman Fried was CEO of Alameda from its inception until in or around October 2021, at which time Caroline Ellison and Sam Bankman became co-CEOs. In or around August 2022, Ellison was the sole CEO. And then they go on in paragraph 18, they kind of absolve any liability to Ellison. They say Alameda had approximately 30 employees. At times, Alameda shared office space and employees with FTX. Bankman Fried remained the ultimate decision maker at Alameda, even after Ellison and Tribeco became co-CEOs around 2021. So they're saying he's responsible for everything Alameda did, not Caroline. In the CFTC complaint, he was charged with fraud against all defendants. And in this one, they listed SBF, FTX, and Alameda. They say he made fraudulent misstatements of material fact and material omission against all defendants. The relief sought is permanent injunction against violating CFTC rules in the future, full restitution of client funds, and civil monetary penalties. As the bankruptcy unfolds, the battle between the U.S. government forfeiture claims and the depositors will hopefully land in favor of the depositors. Many regulators are using this debacle as a chance to call for the industry to become subject to heightened regulatory scrutiny. But actually, we have all the existing rules against fraud, and it looks like those rules are going to be enforced after all. Thank you.